Good morning and welcome to Convocation. I'm delighted to be the Convocation speaker for Holistic Health Week. And what an important week, especially in the middle of this semester and in such a beautiful weather kind of week. It's a great week to be thinking about wellness and how we take care of ourselves. So hopefully you've had a chance to do yoga or there's been some creative spaces created for you, creating space for grief, creating space for disagreement, and tomorrow, creating space for play. So definitely be looking out for that. But creating spaces to be well. That's what we're thinking about during Holistic Health Week. And as college students, that's a very important place to start, especially in the middle of the semester. Are you well? Wendell Berry, author of fiction, poetry, and short stories, has this collection of short stories that I love called Fidelity. And in one of those stories, Elton, one of the characters, wakes up in the night because it's been raining and the river has flooded. This is short stories about this fictional community called Port Williams in Kentucky, rural Kentucky. And he wakes up in the night and he's thinking, are Art and Mart okay? There's these elderly brothers. And so he calls his friend Andy and they have this conversation over the phone. Have you heard from them? No, their phone's out, haven't heard from them. And so they decide, well, now that we've thought about it, we actually need to go check on them. And so they meet up and they get in the truck and it's late at night and they drive out to Mart and Art's property as far as they can. And they have to get out and the story unfolds with them just making their way through the woods in the rain and the quiet. And they get over a ridge and they expect to see a light on and there's no light on. And so they realize the electricity is out too. And they make their way over the next ridge and as close as they can to the edge of the water. And they do see one little light in the window, just an oil lamp. And Elton calls out, "Mart, are you all right?" And they wait for an answer. And I love this story for how it portrays the simple ways in which we reach out to each other. Are you all right? This isn't like a revolutionary intervention. This is just checking on a neighbor. They're simple acts of goodness, simple ways to stop and think, are you all right? And then to ask. As a college student, what does that look like? What does it look like to be all right? We've been exploring that this week in Holistic Health. We've been asking questions around how are you all right in grief or in disagreement? How do we do that? But in your studies, in your calling to be a student, how are you well? I work in college student development. I'm director of advising and first year experience. And college student development is a field of work. And we study things like academic success, thriving, first year experience, transitions. I serve on committees at Gordon like the Early Alert team and the Enrollment and Persistence team. Yes, it's a thrill. And in this team, we're actually thinking about things like academic success. And we're very aware that right now is the middle of the semester and you just received your midterm grades. In fact, first year students, you just received an email from me last week showing you how to find your midterm grades on My Gordon. So there's staff like me at Gordon who are hoping and praying for your academic success. But honestly, I don't love the word success. When I think about your academic success at Gordon, I like to think about holistic health or maybe academic flourishing or academic wellness. Are you all right? What does academic wellness look like for you? What can this look like on our campus? I want to suggest that academic wellness, academic health, being all right, involves faith, hope, and love. So let's start with faith. But first, actually, let's just talk about surviving. There is a lot going on right now. If you are a first-year student, you are in your 8th or 9th week of class, and things might be harder than you thought. You maybe miss home more than you thought, and it's harder to make connections than what you thought. If you're an upper class student, you've experienced losses. Maybe you've lost a study abroad or internship, and favorite events that you thought you were going to be participating in Gordon have changed completely or been canceled. And we're in a pandemic. So you're wearing a mask all the time, loads of physical distancing, eating outside or in your room alone. And so social anxiety is high. And on top of that, we have all this technology to deal with, right? Canvas courses that aren't up to date, Respondus lockdown browser that is stressing you out, and you know what I'm talking about. And it's too much. It feels like too much, right? Rotating classrooms, hybrid learning, online learning. So there's some serious anxiety about all this technology. And all of this is leading to an academic anxiety you did not think that you were experiencing. So can I take a minute to say, you are great. You are crushing it. We see you. We see you showing up on Zoom calls or in class. And excuse me, just by showing up, you are surviving. Maybe that fight song is ringing around in your head sometimes, right? I will survive. I won't sing the rest of it. It's on my daughter's playlist for running, but it is a good song to get you motivated and get you up in the morning. And some of you are up against a lot. And surviving is a good thing. C.S. Lewis offers this encouragement in Mere Christianity, recognizing that for some, life is just very hard. He says, "Do not despair. He, God, knows all about it. You are one of the poor whom he blessed. He knows what a wretched machine you are trying to drive. Keep on. Do what you can. One day he will fling it on the scrap heap and give you a new one. And then you may astonish us all, not least yourself, for you have learned your driving in a hard school." My sister watches the show Survivor, and it's kind of become her COVID-19 thing, although she was watching it before then. But this is a serious show. Like, it has been going on for 40 seasons, 20 years. It started at the beginning of this century, so before some of you were even born. It has been around for a while, and it has seriously caught the imagination of the viewer. And so she was explaining to me that in Survivor, the goal is to outwit, outplay, and outlast the others. 20 people placed in an environment where they have to survive or get voted off by the others. And the conditions are pretty abysmal, right? Not even a match to light a fire. And the final survivor wins $1 million. So there is some serious motivation. But you never really know where you stand with the other people. You can't trust them. They may stab you in the back or just vote you off. So my sister watches it for the intrigue and the adventure and distraction, quite frankly. But she actually knows what surviving looks like. She's living it. Because her husband died a number of years ago from cancer. And she has had to figure out how to get up in the morning and get into the day. And I see how she's surviving. She's getting up each day and stepping into that day, even if she's not feeling it. She's having a grace for herself when things are tough, and in grief, there are days when things are really tough. She shared with me one of her key verses, which is Habakkuk 3, verse 17 to 19. "Though the fig tree does not bud, though there are no grapes on the vines, though the olive crop fails and the fields produce no food, though there are no sheep in the pen and no cattle in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God my Savior. The sovereign Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer. He enables me to go on to the heights." This is faith. This is faith, trust and confidence in God's sustaining work, faith that gets you up in the morning. Though there is no evidence that God is at work, there are no sheep in the pen and no cattle in the stalls. Or, there doesn't seem to be an end to this pandemic. Or, I don't think anybody knows me here and I feel all alone. Remember the yet. Yet I will rejoice. leaning on faith that God does not abandon his people. So friends, I want to encourage you to cultivate your faith to survive. Through worship and reading scripture and Christian fellowship, maybe journal about God has been at work in your life or in the life of your family, or even in the words of scripture. Read the Psalms, these accounts of how God has remembered his people and has not abandoned them. And know that we do not do this alone. You are not alone. Reach out to others. Or check up on a friend that you haven't heard from in a while and ask, are you all right? Lean into your faith. Dr. Stanley Hauerwas, theologian, says, to worship God and live faithfully are necessary conditions if you are to survive in college. To worship God and live faithfully are necessary conditions if you are to survive in college. But he goes on, but as a Christian, you are called to do more than survive. You're called to use the opportunity you have been given to learn to construe the world as a creature of God who would have us enjoy and bask in the love that has brought us into existence. That doesn't sound like surviving. That sounds like something more. To enjoy and bask in God's love. So you may feel like you're surviving, and that is a good thing. That is a good thing. But let me tell you, that is not all there is. And so let's talk about hope. There is more than just getting up and showing up. We are meant to flourish. Or maybe we can use the word thriving. What does that look like for students to thrive? The concept of thriving, applied here, means to be engaged in learning and making the most of your college education. That's from Dr. Lori Schreiner. She's a researcher and a Christian working out of Azusa Pacific University in college student development. And she developed this thriving construct because she was not satisfied with the college student development framework around student success. And I'm with her on this. So she developed this thriving construct. And there's 3 components to it. She explains that thriving is optimal flourishing in 3 main areas: academic engagement, interpersonal relationships, and psychological well-being. So 3 main areas that make up what it looks like for a college student to thrive: academic engagement, interpersonal relationships, and psychological well-being. So academic engagement. Academic engagement involves using academic strategies. And so at this point in the semester, you may need to dig in deep or dig around to find the resources that you need to finish well. If you haven't visited the Academic Success Center yet, or the Writing Center, I definitely encourage you to do that. Make the most of your academic advising appointment. We're moving into advising season. Reach out to your faculty. If you don't understand your midterm grades or how they came to those grades, definitely reach out to your faculty and ask for help. We are here to help you. We want to see you thrive. Don't do this alone. So one way to cultivate thriving in your academic work is to better understand what your strengths are and to explore that. So many of the first year students actually this summer in GC 101 were invited to do the Clifton Strengths. And actually I think about 50% of our campus now has done the Clifton Strengths. So you can go onto the app, which is the Gallup app, or go to strengthsquest.com and log in, and you can see your top 5 signature themes. And there's information about how you can dive in deeper and explore that, and actually even some action items for how to practice the things that are talents so that you get better at leaning into your strengths and applying that to the classroom experience. So I'm inviting you to focus on how God has designed you and enabled you to do good work and apply that to your academic life. And if you don't know your strengths and you'd like to, please just email advising@gordon.edu and we'll get you set up to complete your own Clifton Strengths. So it helps to know what your strengths are and work to cultivate them. So that's academic engagement. Reach out, find the resources, and stay connected in your academic work. But there's more to thriving, right? Academic wellness involves the whole person. That's what holistic health is. So thriving includes relationships, interpersonal relationships. College students thrive when they're connected. Honestly, we all thrive when we're connected. I do. That's one of my top 5 signature themes, connectedness. So I love being part of something bigger than myself, or I lead best when I'm part of a team. Those of you who know Chris Carlson have been asked that. I lead best when. So for me, it's being part of a team. So sitting in my office alone, working on a program alone is not really a great scene. I'm being stretched in this. But we know that connection with others is essential to your thriving as a student. So this can be hard even when we're not in a pandemic. But it's especially hard when we're physically distant, wearing masks, and studying online. So I encourage you to reach out and find those around you and stay connected. David Brooks, in his new book, The Second Mountain, explores how real joy comes from getting outside ourselves, actually, and making commitments to others, to our vocation, to marriage or family, to our faith, or to our community. He's come to realize, and the whole book is this exploration about how this whole culture of individualization has been a lie, and that we really shouldn't live for ourselves or our passions or our success. But he's calling us to reach out for the other and live into our commitments. Gallup conducted a survey of 30,000 students nationwide to try to identify the precise experiences students have on campus that contribute to well-being. And what they found is that there are 3 top influencers that affect thriving. So 1, at my school, I have the opportunity to do what I do best. So that's about using your strengths. So one of the top influencers for students thriving, at my school, I have the opportunity to do what I do best, leaning into your strengths and doing them well. The second one, I feel safe at my school. Feeling safe contributes to thriving. And this is something college campuses have some work to do. Do students of color feel safe on this campus? Do LGBTQ plus students feel safe on this campus? What am I doing to contribute to your thriving, to help you feel safe? That's definitely worth a gut check. How can we as a community help all of God's children feel safe? Gordon's commitment to shalom says, we are all created in God's image, and as such are worthy of dignity and respect as persons. We are all made in the image of God, embodied in culture and communities, and God says, that is good. The third area that students identified as a top influence in their thriving is this. Students at my school look out for one another. And when I read that in my research, I was really struck. Can we say that about Gordon College? Is that true? Calling out to your neighbor, are you all right? Let's not leave each other stranded, or worse yet, vote each other off the island. Some of you are doing okay right now. Some of you are actually really thriving. And so I'm going to encourage you to reach out to those around you. Reach out and help others get connected. My pastor tells this story often at church. Imagine you're on a road trip as a family, and everybody gets in the car, and you're going down the highway, and you know you need a break, so you stop at a rest area. And you get out, you get your coffee, you go to the restroom, you get your Dunkins, and you climb back in. And you're barreling back down the highway, and you're passing around the box of Munchkins, and you realize you left somebody behind. One of the kids is still at the rest area. Oh, well, you say, let's just keep going. No, you get off the next exit, you turn around, and you head back, right? You don't leave them behind. And that's the body of Christ. We don't leave someone behind. There are people at Gordon that need to get into your van and share your Munchkins. So go find them. So that's all about thriving, by building healthy relationships, creating space where people can thrive, where there's opportunity for people to feel safe and feel connected. So thriving, broadly, we've had academic engagement and personal relationships, interpersonal relationships. And now the third. And the third is psychological well-being, taking care of your mental health. So holistic health has hopefully helped with that this week, remembering to pause and create space. And so hopefully you've been practicing some of those opportunities and experiences. So here's another one. Go to the Gordon College Counseling Center website. And what you'll see on the front page is, of course, the intake form, which if you need a counselor, I encourage you to do that. But there's also a tab there for self-help strategies. And I encourage you to take a look. The list is long. I invite you to practice some of them. Maybe you'll be surprised to find out that you are practicing some of them and they're actually becoming strengths for you, which is awesome. But encourage each other to add one or two more to your self-care strategies. Maybe call your pastor from home to check in, or talk to family and friends that know you well. It's so good to be known by somebody. And seek out beauty. I was reminded of that this week, a number of weeks ago, but certainly the weather this week has drawn us into natural beauty. But Bruce Herman, professor of art here at Gordon, spoke during homecoming, reminding us that we need beauty to be well. True beauty is rooted in God, and so works of beauty, poetry, music, art, are rooted in the person of God. We need works of beauty in a pandemic or when things are very difficult. We need God at all times, and beauty can be a true comfort. Bruce says, the true source of art is the great artist himself, and he is breathing into us and through us that same beauty, which is for the healing of the nations. Or as Isaiah 61 verse 3 says, he will give them beauty for ashes, and the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of heaviness. So let's hold on to hope. Hope is essential for thriving. Some of you know Heidi. She's a counselor in our counseling center, and she wrote a piece back in May as the pandemic was rising up about grief and about hope, expectancy, actually. She first acknowledges that grief is real, just recognizing all the losses that you've experienced. But she also urges you not to lose expectancy, to hold on to hope. She writes, gather up your strength, wrap your arms around hope and expectancy, and drag it with you into the days to come. There is work to be done in this new day. There is learning and exploring ahead, and there's purpose and meaning calling you forward. That, my friends, is hope. Wrap your arms around hope and drag it with you into the days to come. There's learning and exploring ahead. So I encourage you to lean onto your faith to survive and hold on to hope to thrive. But what's it all for? So let's get to that. What is this purpose and meaning that Heidi is talking about? What's it all for? In TGC, you read this essay by C.S. Lewis called Learning in Wartime. And Lewis is responding to the issue of whether it's okay for a student to be learning to be a student during the war. And his answer is yes. Lewis actually challenges the listener because he says that Christians in college always have to be answering this question. We have to ask how it is right or even psychologically possible, and here's what he writes, for creatures who are every moment advancing either to heaven or to hell, to spend any fraction of the little time allowed them in this world on such comparative trivialities as literature or art, mathematics or biology. End of quote. Indeed, the Christian life invites learning as an important human activity, because Lewis even says good philosophy must exist because bad philosophy needs an answer. So we have work to do, right? But it goes even deeper than that. And here's where we get to love. This is about reorienting our lives toward God and God's redemptive purposes in the world. This means paying attention to what's going on in the world and studying it for the sake of the world. I'm teaching a class right now called Exploring Vocation, and we're reading Visions of Vocation by Steve Garber. Garber invites us to come and see, to know the world, to know the hurts of the world, to be invited into the brokenness of the world and then still love it. For God so loved the world. He made it good. And he sees the brokenness in the world, and he invites us into his redeeming work in the world. So that's my hope for you in college, that your world would open up, that you would learn about the world and then still love it. In fact, that you would come to some sense of calling about God's work and see the invitation to join God in his work. Neil Plantinga, in his essay, Educating for Shalom, describes how shalom means more than peace of mind, right? In the Bible, shalom means universal flourishing, wholeness, and delight. And so Plantinga invites us into the calling in education to equip ourselves with the knowledge, the skills, and the attitudes that can be thrown into the struggle for shalom, the battle for universal wholeness and delight. You are called into education to be thrown into the battle for shalom. So Plantinga asks, how will your education be used to clear some path, some part of the human jungle, or restore some of the lost loveliness in God's world, or introduce some novel beauty into it? As followers of Christ, we're invited, or called really, to participate in God's creative work, tending a garden, or composing a symphony, or raising children, or maybe leading a new venture. All creative work that God invites us into, our Creator. We're also invited into God's redeeming work by learning to embody God's love for his creation and for each other, welcoming the stranger, exploring immune function, pulling invasive plants from a salt marsh. Living out this understanding of God's call on our lives requires the whole of our lives. And we do this over time. It's what Eugene Peterson calls the long and faithful obedience in the same direction. And we do this together. Eric Mason writes in Woke Church, I'm so grateful that God saved us to be in relationship with him, but he also bought us to be in relationship with one another. God's intent is for us to hurt with one another, to care about the suffering of the other, to love God, love each other, and love God's good creation. That's what gives a solid foundation for thriving, or that's where the hope is directed. Faith to get us through the very difficult days, to survive. Hope, holding on to hope, so as to thrive in our academic engagement, in your personal well-being, and in your relationships with each other, all for the sake of love, for each other, for God, and for his good creation. The friends in the Wendell Berry story don't actually need to wait long to find out how their friends are doing. They see a light come on in another window as an oil lamp is lit, and they hear a door open and Art call out yes. But there's a tenderness as the story finishes, as Andy recalls how the two stood against the water and called out to each other, reaching out to each other to check on each other and see if they were okay. Faith, hope, and love. Let's reach out, lean onto our faith, hold on to hope, all for the sake of love, so that all may thrive. Thank you, and God's peace be with you.